Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Welcome to Strange Things with Chris James, broadcasting from the auxiliary radio station for Arkanasa Radio in Laredo, Texas. And welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. Tonight, we're going to be talking about UFOs. Probably because the Edinburgh UFO Festival is next week. Thursday, April 8th in the evening, beginning at 6 p.m. at the Food Truck Park, just north of City Hall, there will be an open mic night. Join us for some UFO stories from your friends and neighbors. Friday evening from 5 p.m. until 10 p.m., the UFO Festival will be at City Hall Courtyard. Fun for the whole family. A Saturday beginning at 5 p.m., yes, it's in the evening, we will be holding the Edinburgh Out of This World UFO Conference at the Ebony Hills Golf Course, 300 West Palm Drive in Edinburgh. The conference will be just a few dozen blocks south of City Hall. In fact, it'll be just a dozen blocks. All events are being held in the great outdoors. Be sure and bring your mask. You don't want anybody to recognize you, or something like that. Yes, masks will be needed at all the events. Now is a good time to start your Christmas shopping. Books make great gifts. They're easy to wrap, and they don't cost a whole lot. Not much good can be said about 2020 other than it's over. The Black Plague managed to shut down or destroy a lot of small businesses. People went nuts with some of their social distancing maneuvers. What with so many people being home with nothing new to watch on TV, a lot of folks looked up and managed to see some things that just might be from some other galaxy. Some of these sightings only had a minimum of information. It seemed like a lot of them were from the United Kingdom. Here are the ones I found worth talking about. There were a lot more that I skipped, mostly because they were simply lights that people had seen in the sky, or they were stories that just sounded a bit iffy. Now, I'm not going to say anybody was lying or making things up, but some YouTube videos that claim to be UFO sightings, well, they're not all that good. Somebody's photoshopping abilities are questionable. The sad thing is also, what with all the drones and things that people are inventing and coming up with new ways to hoax, it's getting harder and harder to be able to look at a UFO, especially in a video or photograph, and say, yeah, that thing's real. Someday maybe they'll come up with some way of knowing for sure, but until then we can only listen to the witnesses and hope they're telling the truth. One of the first sightings of 2020 occurred 10 minutes into the new year. This happened in Scottsdale, Arizona. Shortly after all the fireworks were over, the witness was outside looking around when they spotted 3 bright orange objects in the sky. Living close to an airport, the witness was familiar with airplanes. These orbs were something else. As he stood there watching, the orbs suddenly began moving through the sky. They were coming in his direction. They appeared to be moving at about 700 to 800 miles an hour. Wanting to catch the objects on his camera, the witness ran inside, grabbed his cell phone. He then began to film the orange flying craft. Due to the fact that he lived near the airport, the witness was familiar with most aircraft that would normally fly overhead. The 3 objects split apart, and they headed in 3 separate directions. It looked as if these strange bright lights were somehow synced to each other because they all made the same maneuvers at the same time. Then, as he was filming, the orange objects faded from sight. None of the folks responsible for tracking anything flying overhead caught any activity at that same time. A saucer was spotted over Newton Abbot, Devon, United Kingdom on the 3rd. January 3rd at 1:30 p.m., a witness was outside testing their brand new Nikon P900 camera. He was panning his camera in every direction, zooming in and out, and looking for anything that he could take a picture of. In the viewfinder, he saw a saucer-shaped flying object. Startled by what he was looking at, he nearly forgot to hit the trigger. Realizing what he was seeing was a flying saucer, he hit the button, catching one photo just before the flying object vanished into the clouds. Some folks wonder how a flying saucer could possibly know it's being filmed. Just about every camera out there uses infrared or ultraviolet as a focusing mechanism. The camera sends out a beam of invisible light that bounces off the object and returns to the camera's sensor. Perhaps the aliens have some kind of a warning device that lets them know when these beams of light are coming in their direction. The next day at 10 p.m. over Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, a witness saw a huge craft hovering in the sky. The craft was silent. It was just hanging there. As he watched, the witness saw a beam of some kind come from the bottom of the craft and touch the ground below. The man watching took a photo of the object, but the beam didn't show up in the picture. The craft looks like a huge ball of light in the sky, kind of like what was seen in Apache Sitgreaves National Forest by Travis Walton and his fellow workers. In 2017, a man in Dartmoor, England, had seen a similar beam coming from a flying craft. This beam had caused him to become sick. Witnesses in Paris, France, also reported seeing a beam coming down from a spacecraft. Could this be related to what hit Travis Walton, causing him to be hurled backwards with so much force and leading to his memorable stories? Yes, I've interviewed Travis Walton on the show, and he's a very interesting person to talk to. Something odd was seen by two folks about 6 p.m. on January 8th in the United Kingdom in East Hertfordshire. A young girl and her father watched the light as it just hung there. It was too bright and too big to be a star. As they watched, the light took on the shape of a triangle and then a sphere. Lines and circles would form in the air around the object. It changed colors a few times, going from red to green to blue to yellow. The pair watched the light using binoculars. They could see it distinctly, and they knew that this was no weather balloon or airplane. The lights were not blinking. At about 8 p.m., the lights faded away. The next day, their sighting was validated by several other witnesses who had seen the same bright light from various parts of the country. The light's changing color reminded me of a story told to me by one of my classmates. Border Patrol agents sometimes will lay in or sit near a landing and wait to see who or what might cross the river illegally. These lay-ins might be because of some intel coming from informants, or sometimes it's just a gut feeling. Willie and his partner were working the evening shift. It was quiet, and they decided to sneak down to what we called One River Place and watch the landings. This area has been the site of many smuggling loads as well as a few murders. The river and the border run from north to south along this area. The two agents found a couple of spots where they could see the river in both directions, and then they got comfortable to wait and see what's going to happen. Willie was scanning the river to the south when he spotted a bright light in the sky. It wasn't there a minute ago, so he got his binoculars out and tried to see if it was an airplane or some other kind of aircraft. As he watched, the light went from red to blue, then back to red. Nothing like an airplane. Willie was a private pilot, and he knew aircraft. The light didn't blink from color to color. It faded from one to the other. The light would change from red to blue on a regular cycle of about 5 seconds. His partner was 25 yards upriver and watching in the other direction. One river place had 7 landing spots used for smuggling, and they wanted to cover all of them. Willie watched the object from 10 p.m. until 11 p.m. The object moved, and it looked as if it were moving downwards towards the ground. From where Willie was sitting, it appeared to have landed in Mexico across the river from El Cenizo. The next day, a physician's assistant who worked at Mercy Hospital began asking any of the agents he knew if anyone had seen the UFO flying over El Cenizo. He lived in that small town, and the kids in his neighborhood told him a saucer-shaped craft with red and blue lights had landed in a field just south of the town. The kids said the craft was there for a few minutes before flying away into the night. Several Border Patrol agents working that same night had seen the red and blue lights. Nobody reported it officially since they didn't want to get a reputation for seeing things, even if they were really there. I already had that weird reputation, so they told me about it. On January 26, 2020, a man living in Wigan, United Kingdom, saw a strange formation of lights from his loft window. He said they were dazzlingly bright and beautiful. It was early in the morning, so the lights were easy to follow. He watched the lights as they passed over his building. He could see they were not airplanes or balloons. After watching the lights, he came to the conclusion these had to be from some distant planet. The witness grabbed his camera and took just one photo. The lights, he said, were visible for about 20 minutes. Had they been balloons, they would have drifted off or changed their formation at the very least. Suddenly, the formation of lights shot straight up into the air, vanishing from sight. It was very early in the morning, so apparently nobody else saw them or nobody else came forward to say they had seen them. Volcanoes are spectacular to watch, and not just for us humans. UFOs seem to be drawn to them as well. Popocatépetl, I hope that's how it's pronounced, it's got way too many letters. Popocatépetl sits between Mexico City, Puebla, and Cuernavaca, and is known to erupt on a regular basis. On January 27th, as the volcano was making a show, the folks observing it spotted a craft emerging from the smoke. The government had installed a few cameras around the volcano so people could see it without having to risk their lives. As people were watching the videos, they saw a craft flying from what looked like the mouth of the volcano. The big question was, did the UFO come from inside the erupting volcano, or did it fly through the smoke and flames in order to perhaps draw off some of the energy to power their engines, or maybe to grab some minerals or elements only found in erupting volcanoes, or simply to have a closer look at this impressive sight? Volcanoes, directly or indirectly, produce or host deposits of aluminum, diamonds, gold, nickel, lead, zinc, and copper. Too many people will try to decide the thoughts of creatures from some far off distant star based on how we think. Aliens from the stars might think in a totally different manner. Perhaps what they consider fun is something we would consider outright crazy and dangerous. Perhaps the things we do they consider to be stupid. We won't know until one of them actually sits down and tells us. Until that time, we're just going to have to watch them and wonder what the heck they're doing. Some folks think that maybe the UFO came from inside the Earth, exiting by means of the volcano itself. Several amber lights were seen over Donna Point, California at 9 p.m. on February 7th. The lights were seen out over the ocean by the witness who spotted them. They were not moving, they just hung there in the sky. At first, the witness thought maybe these were military flares being dropped by some aircraft. The lights looked like they were one on top of another, almost touching. Combined with the total lack of movement, this caused the witness to believe the lights were something else, something otherworldly. The lights did look like flares, except there's no reason the military would drop flares one on top of another. If it was an airplane shooting out flares to distract a pursuing missile, the flares would shoot out in a wide pattern to get the most coverage. If this were for illumination, the flares would only light up one small spot. The military's been using flares long enough to know how to disperse them. These lights just looked weird. The Auburn, Washington, a cross-shaped object caught someone's eyes. A little after 6 p.m., the woman was walking out the door of her garage when she spotted a cross-shaped object floating above her on February 12th. She called her husband to come out and see this weird-looking object. The cross looked kind of like a hologram. When it did move, it looked jerky, as if it was jumping from one spot to another to get to its new location. They continued watching this strange craft until it disappeared from their sight in the distance. When the object had vanished from sight, the witnesses became aware of a strange buzzing sound coming from a short distance away. Thinking about the flying cross, they decided maybe some terrestrial craft was there to keep an eye on this unknown craft. They never did find out what they'd seen or what they were listening to. The next day, the 13th, some people saw a sphere of light over Winnipeg, Canada. The witnesses were at home when they noticed the strange object over their heads, describing it as a sphere of light. Shortly after spotting the sphere, the couple saw two more glowing objects, which joined up with the first. The lights seemed to get brighter and then kind of fade away, but they always stayed in one place. The sound of a plane coming their way drew their attention to a military aircraft flying straight at the three spheres. As the plane got closer, the spheres all began to move to the west and then faded from sight. They didn't vanish over the horizon, they simply blinked out of existence. In many UFO sightings, the military show up causing the UFOs to either run for it or blink out of sight. On a few occasions, the military are seen escorting the UFO. This leads me to believe some UFOs are working hand in hand with the military, while others are truly unknown. On February 25th, the story broke concerning a UFO that came a little too close to the International Space Station. They said the UFO was the size of a bus. It remained in view from the ISS for about 20 minutes. This space station is either a draw for UFOs, or being out there in space, they're in a position to see things that the rest of us miss due to it being too far away or hidden in the clutter of other aircraft crisscrossing our skies. Anytime something is seen by NASA, they want to keep it under wraps. The ISS and the ground control switch to an encrypted channel to discuss what is there over our heads. For unknown reasons, the channel switch didn't happen, and the folks here on Earth heard and saw the entire occurrence. As the footage surfaced online, it would spread like wildfire, as did the theories as to what the thing was in the first place. Estimates of its size would largely agree. It was approximately the size of a bus, and it was likely traveling somewhere around 5 miles per second, or 18,000 miles an hour. As people watched the video feed, they began to speculate to what they were seeing. One thought it was a spacecraft from distant stars. Others thought it might be the X-37B, a top-secret space plane. Why would a top-secret space plane fly close enough to the ISS to be seen? And why didn't they switch to the encrypted channel? NASA, never a straight answer, said it was simply space debris floating past the ISS. Over Sao Paulo, Brazil, on February 16th at 3 or 4 p.m., a person was walking around outside when they spotted an odd-looking object up in the sky. They got out their cell phone and used the camera to zoom in on it. At first glance, it looked like a balloon, round and kind of silvery. Then, long, thin tentacles came into sight. It looked more and more like a flying jellyfish. The size couldn't be determined, but it had to have been rather large to be visible at such a distance. The tentacles were about 5 times the length compared to the diameter of the upper cylinder. The tentacles were moving around very slowly, but not as if blown by the wind. They were moving in different directions all at once. In the video, they look more like they're feeling around the air for some unknown reason. Some folks watching the video say this could be some kind of an unknown creature, or a new cryptid. Others say it could be some kind of a machine made to look like a living creature. Either way, the thing was unidentified and it was flying. Surprisingly enough, this is not the only time something like this has been seen. Charles Fort, author and investigator of the odd, speculated there was a species of nearly transparent jellyfish that floated in the upper atmosphere. Over the years, pilots have reported seeing odd-shaped objects in the sky that they thought resembled jellyfish. People have found large numbers of dead birds with burn marks on them, which they believe could have been caused by a jellyfish-type sting. In the 50s, a police constable was riding his bike when he saw a flying jellyfish that landed on the road in front of him. He bumped it with his bike tire and said it was kind of squishy and it gave off a weird wet smell. In August 1994, Oakville, Washington was covered in strange jelly-like substance. Globs of some unknown substance was found all over the small town. Scientists said they found what looked like white blood cells in this jelly. The government stepped in and all the samples vanished. March 3, 2020, at about 10 p.m., a witness noticed a V-shaped object moving overhead in Ashland, Kentucky. As the witness was watching, a small craft detached from the main UFO and flew away. It was dark, making the UFO a bit hard to see. However, it showed up as being blacker than the night sky. It blotted out the stars as it moved. At one point, all the stars of Orion's belt were covered by this flying craft. The small craft returned and hooked back up with the main craft, and the V-shaped moved away, vanishing from sight after a few minutes. In Arkansas, a man and his son were driving home from the theater. It was the evening of the 6th at about 8:40 p.m. In the distance, they saw a bright light hanging in the sky. It was close to the horizon and not moving. The object was so bright it made looking at it difficult. They tried to take a picture, but the object only showed up as a bright white washed-out image. Talking about what they were seeing, they realized that their relative had seen a similar object in the sky at this same location only a few weeks before. The trouble with seeing unexplained lights in the sky is there's nothing solid to look into, and they don't photograph very well. They're just a bright light that doesn't look like a star or anything else that we know of. March 6th, in Leighton Buzzard, England, two young girls saw what looked like diamonds floating in the sky. I had to look that up. Buzzard? It comes from an Old English term, beau desert, or beautiful desert, and it changed its spelling and pronunciation over the time, and it eventually became called Buzzard. So it's called Leighton Buzzard. It's a town about 35 miles northwest from London. Jasmine and Amelia were walking to their grandparents' home when they saw several diamonds floating in the sky at about 5 p.m. Believing this was a bunch of UFOs, they got their cell phones out and they began filming. The diamonds were visible for about 10 minutes. As they stood there, transfixed by these flying objects, their uncle came along. He looked up at these weird things in the sky, and he became convinced that they were UFOs as well. Jasmine said the UFOs didn't look as if they were flying, but it was more like they were floating. Her father said the area was known for odd sightings, and this was just one more unexplained thing. A string of lights were seen in Cowichan Valley on March 17th. The first witness was standing on his deck when he spotted several bright lights that looked like they were in line. As he watched, there appeared to be more lights coming into view. The lights were at about 30,000 feet, and they were evenly spaced apart. The witness called his son, who lived next door, to have a look and see what he thought. As they were looking, more lights would come into view. Soon it looked like there were about 100 lights, all evenly spaced and in a perfect line. The line of lights was moving upwards into the sky. For 10 minutes they stood and watched these bright lights. When a reporter was looking into the story, he ran into a neighbor who said he had seen the lights as well, but it was the night before the other witnesses. There had also been about 100 of them, and they were in a straight line, drifting upwards as well. This couldn't have been flares, since they were moving upwards. No balloons, since they stayed in a line and they stayed evenly spaced out. There are now drones that can be kept in perfect alignment by computer, but nobody ever came forward saying that this was a demonstration of modern technology. Like I said earlier, with all these new drones coming out, it's getting more and more difficult to look at a UFO and say that's something from somewhere else or that's just somebody playing around. The 18th of March, when SpaceX Starlink launched, many viewers of the live stream watched what appeared to be a round disc-like object entering or leaving our planet's atmosphere. The object appeared to have a metallic shell that was reflective, but it wasn't shiny like a mirror. There have been many odd sightings occur during rocket launches and spaceship recoveries. A bunch of orbs were spotted over St. Petersburg, Russia, on March 25th. At 8:30 p.m., the orbs were seen in a straight line, one on top of the other. After staying in one spot long enough to be photographed, the lights began to move down towards the ground. When the camera was zoomed in, the lights looked to take on a triangular formation before they vanished. What I find interesting was these lights looked almost exactly like the sightings from Donna Point, California, made on February 7th. With that, I'm going to take a very brief pause, play some commercials, hopefully get some business for some of my friends. So don't go away, we'll be right back after this. Did you stay up all night watching horror movies and now you think your house might be haunted? Contact the Laredo Paranormal Research Society and have them come by and check out your house. Maybe you accidentally invited a ghost or a spirit, or maybe it's just the plumbing. You can contact the Laredo Paranormal Research Society at laredoparanormal@hotmail.com. It's a bird. It's a plane. I need to get my eyes checked. Where am I going to get my eyes checked? Why, at Optica del Norte, 107 Calle del Norte, right across the street from the Embassy Suites. You should be able to see what you're looking at. Coffee. Without it, we would never have had the Industrial Revolution. We'd all be still living in Europe in mud huts. Here in Laredo, we have the Organic Man Coffee Trike. 4501 McPherson, the best coffee on the planet. If you can't get to Laredo, you can order from the Organic Man Coffee Trike.shop. It's time to take better care of your skin. After all, it is the biggest organ in your body. Contact Lourdes James at 956-723-3019. Talk to her about a free skincare consultation. This is Arkanasa Radio you've been listening to. When I was talking about how the Black Plague of 2020 had closed so many small businesses, it reminded me that now would be a good time to support some of your small local businesses. Stop giving all your money to these ginormous companies that are making one billionaire after another. Here in Laredo, we have the Phoenix Bookstore. They sell books down on Victoria Street, and if you're in town, stop by and pick up a couple. If you're not in Laredo, you can get a hold of the Phoenix Bookstore at bookshop.org/shop/the Phoenix Bookstore. Don't spend your money on these giant corporations that already have too much money as it is. The next report comes from Newton Abbey, United Kingdom. At about 4 p.m. on March 26, the man heard a helicopter close to his home. Looking outside, he saw the chopper had landed in a field nearby. Wanting to get a good photograph as the helicopter took off, he grabbed his camera and stepped outside. As the chopper took off, the man focused on the craft and took several photos. As he was clicking away, he spotted a saucer-shaped object in the sky just above the helicopter. The object was only there for a very brief moment, and then it zoomed away at incredible speed. The witness was able to get the unknown craft in several photos. Investigators looked at the images but could find no evidence of tampering, manipulation, or hoax. An intriguing piece of footage surfaced April 4th showing something massive moving close to the moon. The footage was taken during the daytime and shows something coming from the dark side of the moon. The dark side of the moon is the side that's always pointed away from the Earth. Due to the rotation of the moon, the same side is always visible to us, no matter where on the planet you're at. According to Pink Floyd, there is no dark side of the moon. As a matter of fact, it's all dark. Some of you will get that. A close examination of the footage showed this was not a planet or a distant star. There is evidence saying the moon is hollow. Combined with it being a lot older than the Earth, this leads many to believe the moon might be an alien base of some kind. The unknown object in the photo was compared to a crater just below it. The size of the crater is known to be 350 miles across, so the object above would come out to be about 30 miles wide. Now I wonder, did this 30-mile wide spacecraft come from behind the moon or from inside it? Could there be an opening in the moon allowing ships to come and go as they please? On the afternoon of April 23rd, shortly after 1:30, photographs were taken of a disc-shaped object flying over Devon region of the United Kingdom. The person who witnessed the object was in their backyard at the time and had originally noticed a helicopter moving overhead, which they attempted to photograph. Devon is about 50 miles from Newton, where the other disc was seen near a helicopter on March 26th. It was after they had captured several shots of the helicopter that the witness had noticed the strangely shaped, fast-moving object. They turned their camera to the object and focused. The object was shaped like a classic flying saucer. They took a photograph very quickly before the object sped away. The photographer said this was not the first time he'd seen a UFO, but it was the first time he had managed to get a photo of one. He thinks the flying saucer might be coming from the ocean since Devon is right on the coast. April 28th, a flying triangle was seen over New York. A video was seen on the internet showing a triangle passing over the city. There's no sound of any kind of engines. The triangle was kind of low to the ground and it had lights at the three corners. This sounds an awful lot like the video that Ishmael had caught in his backyard back in 2010. At around 7:20, April 28th, in Selland Grove, Pennsylvania, a strange blue orb object was captured in a photograph over the Susquehanna River. The witness who captured the photograph was on their usual morning walk and had simply stopped near a boat launch for a brief rest when they noticed this strange object. They said they noticed the orb moving away from the Samokin Dam power plant towards the mountains on the other side of the river. They quickly snapped a picture. There have been several sightings of these blue-green orb-like objects over the same time period. One was in California of a blue-green orb clearly moving in the sky overhead. Another is an almost identical sighting of the same kind of orb from northern England. Whether or not these blue-green orbs are related, or possibly the same thing, is unknown at this time. A white disk was seen over Dwarscorbos, South Africa on May 1st. A man was taking photos of interesting-looking cloud formations. When he went to look at his images, he noticed there was a white disk in one. A white UFO could hide in a cloud and never be seen. The photographer would never have seen the UFO if he hadn't loaded his images onto his computer and blown them up while he was looking at them. At just before 7 p.m. on 26th May, in Williamsburg, Pennsylvania, A witness who had just stepped out of his truck noticed a strange rectangular-shaped craft suddenly rise up into the sky, coming from behind one of the mountains that overlooked the road. The witness watched as the object continued to rise upwards, eventually stopping at about 500 feet above the top of the mountain. Trying to not lose sight of the UFO, the driver reached into his truck to grab his cell phone. He got one image of the craft before it shot away at lightning speed. The witness said it was almost like the camera had caused the craft to flee. The witness said this was no airplane or drone. He knows what these look like, and the UFO was not one of them. There was no sound of small rotors or any kind of engine sound. Just before 11 p.m. on May 29th in Oxfordshire in the United Kingdom, a local resident witnessed a bright green light moving extremely fast across the darkened sky. As they followed this bizarre sight, the witness noticed how it changed color from red, then to white. They would describe the color change as slow and controlled. Despite this demonstration of control, the object itself appeared to move quite erratically. First it would go right and then left. It eventually disappeared into the distance. The witness would dismiss the idea that this was a plane or a helicopter simply to the fact that there were no flashing lights that are mandatory on all such aircraft, and the direction of travel had changed so quickly and sharply. May 31st, a triangular object was seen over the skies of Camden County in New Jersey. The object was noticed at about 9:40 p.m., according to a few details available. The object was filmed and footage clearly shows 3 dots in a triangular formation moving in the night sky. When the video was shown to the public, a second witness came forward, only from Scotland, saying he'd seen the same or a similar craft only a few days earlier out over the ocean. During the early afternoon of June 26th in Devon, United Kingdom, a black oval object was spotted by a local resident who was photographing the Tegan estuary. He was making a video of the water when he noticed the object in his viewfinder. The object was hovering and stationary. It didn't move at all. There was no sound coming from it. As the witness was watching, the object simply vanished as if it dissolved into thin air. Almost immediately after the object was gone, a black helicopter appeared out of nowhere behind the witness and headed in the direction of the object. The witness continued to watch the helicopter for several minutes as it circled the spot where the black object had been. After circling the spot for several minutes, the helicopter moved away from the location at high speed. The witness said in his report that it was pretty clear to him the occupants of the helicopter were aware of the black object, and they were looking for it when they were circling the area. He said it looked like that UFO activity. He said it looks as if UFO activity is still being closely monitored by the government or the military of the United Kingdom. Whether they were alerted to the object's presence or whether they had prior knowledge that it would show up is open to debate. A sighting from July featured a disc-shaped craft just off the south coast of England in Goddington, Pagton. It was just before 4:20 p.m. in the afternoon when the witness spotted something moving under the water. He continued watching the strange anomaly, noticing that it was very dark and very strange looking. It appeared to be heading towards the witness. The next thing he knew, a black saucer-shaped object emerged from the water and flew into the air at incredible speed. It continued upward into the sky until it disappeared from sight. The witness had his camera, and he managed to snap a picture of the strange craft. Once the UFO was out of sight, the witness noticed other strange things moving just above the water. He brought up his camera to get more photos, but the craft took off in several directions. These craft were also dark-colored, just like the first one. The next day, the same man was standing on the cliff just a short distance from his first sighting. He saw two cruise ships moving through the water. As he was looking at the ships with his camera, he noticed another black saucer flying right over one of the ships. It flew a short ways from the ship and dove into the water. As it hit the surface, there was no splash or any indication that the craft had hit. Some suggest these were some kind of secret military aircraft. If so, why test them in the daytime and close to cruise ships where hundreds of people might see them? At a little before 8 p.m., at a little before 8 a.m. on July 20th, a local resident of Lausanne, Switzerland, saw a bell-shaped object in the sky. The witness made a video of the strange craft as it hovered in the air. The craft looked like the UFO that had been seen in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania in 1965. As the witness was scanning the surrounding area, the UFO vanished from sight. The afternoon of October 11th in South Korea, a resident used his meditating skills to summon a UFO. He appeared to have provided video proof of this strange mental request to extraterrestrial entities. The witness said before he summoned up this strange craft, he had told his friend to be outside at a certain time so he would see it. In the video, the craft appears at the summoner's working of his magic. It was hard to put that into words. The craft appears as the person summoning it was working his magic. That didn't sound any better. This does sound a bit hard to believe. However, if the man making the meditative request had previous contact with beings from a distant galaxy, and maybe they had implanted a device in him which made a mental contact from one to the other, this could explain what he was doing. Then, there are times that people have stated aliens spoke to them using telepathic means. This could also explain the UFO appearing when it called. I really hate to think anybody could read my mind. I'm afraid they'd think I was nuts. My mind does wander a lot. That's why it sounds like I don't know what I'm saying a lot of the times. I'm saying one thing, but I'm thinking another. Talk about confusing. Could UFOs, could aliens from outer space read our minds? That's just a horrible thought all the way around. The evening October 27th in El Paso, Texas, a local resident managed to record a strange disc-shaped object in the night sky overhead. The craft hung there around long enough for the witness to capture a considerable amount of footage. The object itself was white and appeared very cloud-like. Occasionally, it would kind of snap in and out of focus. It's clear that the solid object and it's moving under what looks to be intelligent control. Once the witness was home and looking at his video, he caught a second odd image. There's what looks like a stick figure or a very skinny person of some kind moving from right to left, disappearing behind a trailer. Whether this strange creature is an alien or not is open to debate. If it's not an alien and not connected to the UFO, then what is it? The video is bizarre, with a UFO combination and the unexplained figure. Something I've never encountered before, but y'all look at the video and see what you think. Just look for El Paso October 27th video. November 13th, Scott Waring, a UFO researcher, was looking over some videos from NASA. He was looking at a video from Saturn when he spotted something odd. There's an object about 3.5 miles long orbiting the huge gas giant. For a moon, this would be quite small, but for a UFO, this would be the mothership. Moons rotate as they orbit, and they're round. This thing is long and thin, and it doesn't rotate. As Scott got to wondering if this could be a flying saucer, and why is it orbiting Saturn? If it is a mothership, what's it doing? Why Saturn? Maybe the UFO is there to extract hydrogen and helium. As I was reading this report, I got to thinking, what if these aliens breathe helium? Their voices would all sound like Mickey Mouse. This would make that first contact not very impressive. As for the hydrogen, maybe that's what they power their ships with. A husband, wife, and their 2 children witnessed a large gray metallic UFO hovering over the Hard Rock Cafe in Hollywood, Florida, on the afternoon of November 15th. The witness recalled that it was just sitting there in the sky above the city. The bizarre object appeared to blur itself out when they began to film it. This is like earlier when I speculated UFOs might be able to detect infrared or ultraviolet light. There could be some kind of a cloaking device that was not working correctly, or maybe that was all it was able to do. It sounds kind of uninteresting, but if a UFO was able to make its image appear blurry, that would lead to a lot of people saying, nah, this is not a real UFO, it's a fake. I don't know how aliens think. Maybe that's part of their thought process. Las Vegas on the morning of November 22nd. Just before 7 a.m., a man was closing the shades on his windows when he spotted something in the sky. Stepping outside, he could see a green glowing object hovering like a helicopter, but without emitting any sound. As he watched, the object began moving. It was coming close to him. As it moved, it looked like the craft was changing shape. Now, this could have been due to the thing turning, or he was getting a different view of it, or it could have been some kind of an advanced technology. The closer it got, the more the craft looked like a spaceship. This ship was the size of a football field. Grabbing his camera, the witness got 15 images of the craft. This was when he noticed there was some kind of a robot-looking creature floating in front of the UFO. He estimated this figure was about 150 feet away, about a half a block, and it appeared to be levitating. Parts of the robot appeared transparent, with the joints that didn't appear to connect. This could have also been due to the joints being the same color as the background, so they didn't show up. The robotic figure remained in sight for several minutes, with the witness saying he believed it was attempting to communicate with him. When he turned to move a little closer to his house, the creature and the glowing green craft disappeared. I'm seeing a lot of reports where UFOs seem to realize when the witness is observing it, causing the craft to move towards the observer. This makes me think maybe they want to be seen, if only by one person. Like I said, we don't know how these creatures might think. There was a strange, stretched-out circular object spotted over Norfolk, United Kingdom, November 24th. The sun was just setting as 64-year-old Kevin was driving through the town of Oxborough. In the sky, he noticed a weird object that looked like a circle, only it was stretched out in shape. It was slowly moving along as if blown by a slight breeze. Compared to the sky, the object was very dark. He watched this bizarre object for about 10 minutes, even noticing that it appeared to change shape as it moved. Kevin put the picture he had captured on social media. Many would suggest that what he had captured was merely a flock of birds. Of course, others said it was just a balloon. It was a weather balloon. I looked at the image, and to me, they looked very similar to the bizarre jellyfish-type object witnessed over Sao Paulo, Brazil, back in mid-February. You couldn't quite make out tentacles, but that could have been what gave the circle that elongated shape. Lights of a possible triangular object were seen over Oregon, November 27th at about 8 p.m. A woman living in Prineville, Oregon, was walking her dog when she saw 3 orange lights in the sky. The lights maintained their positions relative to each other as they moved through the air. They were in the shape of a huge triangle moving silently away from her. She said the lights were visible for about 30 seconds. Once the triangle was gone, a single orange light appeared in the same spot and hung there for another 30 seconds. The skeptics rushed out to say this was just Chinese lanterns. Chinese lanterns is the weather balloon explanation of the 2000s. The witness thinks this was a UFO, not just some trash from Earth. Think about it. All those people who released Chinese lanterns, sending them away with no regard as to where they've come down, they're littering. At 6:30 December 2nd in Beaverton, Oregon, a local man was driving to work when he noticed a strange white metallic object hovering in the morning sky. He decided he was seeing something really strange, so he reached for his phone and took a photo of it. In the picture is what appears to be a metallic surface reflecting the early morning sun. The witness states it was most definitely not the planet Venus, which he could see at the same time as the object. What's more, the object was way too big to be a planet. The witness said there was a triangular shape to the object. Some folks think flying triangles are a new thing, but they've actually been with us for years. Many sightings dated back to the 1950s and 60s. Multiple UFOs were sighted off the coast of Florida on December 6th. As the sun set on the evening just off the coast of Ruskin, Florida, several strange lights were witnessed and recorded. These UFOs looked to be glowing, or they might have been reflecting the sun. Whatever the case may be, the craft are perfectly visible in the recording. They appear to be some ways out to sea, which makes me wonder just how big were they. Many UFO researchers believe UFO bases exist in various coastal locations around the world. Florida certainly has a wealth of UFO history. Just look at how many UFO sightings are reported from either coastal areas or way out at sea. December 20th, in broad daylight, a bizarrely shaped UFO was witnessed and recorded flying through the skies of Mexico City. What people were seeing was a round object with 2 smaller round objects on top of it. I hate to say it, but it sounds like Mickey Mouse's head. The witnesses all said this thing did not look like a balloon. It looked metallic. It wasn't being blown by the wind. It hung in one place, rotating in a circle. Mexico City is a bit of a hot spot for UFO sightings. The day before Christmas Eve in Orange County, California, during the evening, 2 huge cigar-shaped UFOs appeared in the skies and remained there for some time. The footage appears to be seen, shot from a hill over the city, with the UFOs either off the California coast or they're directly on top of the city itself. If these UFOs were off the coast, they would have to have been enormous to show up so clearly. If they were over the city, there should be thousands of other witnesses. I have found instances where people have missed or ignored strange things going on right around them. There could have been thousands of witnesses who felt telling about what they saw would bring ridicule on their heads, but Californians have a reputation for not caring what anybody else thinks. Christmas Eve in Atlanta, Georgia, a local resident managed to capture footage of a black disc-shaped object in the sky overhead. The object appears and very much like the classic UFO. The thing even moves like a classic UFO. There's an apparent black mist or a fog that appears to surround the object. There are different opinions as to what this might be. Some believe it is a form of cloaking technology, while others speculate that this is a result of their propulsion. Perhaps it's some kind of a gravity canceling entity that allows the UFO to hover in the air without being drawn towards the Earth. There were a lot of reports I didn't talk about on the show. I picked these because they caught my interest for some odd reason or other. If you liked what you heard, tell your friends. Let them know what they're missing. If you have a UFO sighting of your own, or some friend or family member told you about, and you're not able to make it to Edinburgh Thursday night to the open mic, send me a note. I'll put it into my next book. It doesn't have to just be a UFO sighting. It can be a ghost. It can be a cryptid. It can just be something really bizarre. Let me know by contacting me at strangethings@arkanasa.com. Until next Saturday, this is Chris James for Strange Things.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, they say murder 3? Strange things that happen here, how stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?